I'm going to tell you how all this really began.
It all started out with a joke. A running gag on the Smith Plays retrospectives on the Treyarch Call of Duty Zombies maps.
24.5.
While not exactly crucial information, knowing how large a map is in Nacht der Untoten is a fun fact, like knowing the Wunderwaffe DG2 can produce max ammo drops on Call of the Dead by shooting electrified zombies. Unfortunately for me, this fun fact caused me to ask what I thought was a pretty simple question. Okay, but how big is Nacht der Untoten actually? Naturally, my first instinct was to look on Google to see if someone else had already figured it out. Clicking on the first few links yielded no useful information. This Reddit thread looked promising, but nothing came of it. So yeah, I took like an hour or two of my life and just yeeted it into oblivion.
So long, Bowser!
Searching on YouTube yielded no results either. For an ordinary person, this is where the story would end. For me, I tried brushing aside this trivial question. However, it bothered me, and I just couldn't seem to let it slide. But what was I gonna do? Figure it out for myself? And then it dawned on me. I very well could. And so, with that realization, I booted up some good old Nacht der Untoten on Call of Duty World at War, where my work began. To start things off, it is important to understand what exactly is being calculated in this video. I thought the first calculation I should perform was the area occupied by the building of Nacht der Untoten, which would include finding the area of the spawn room as well as the help room. The second calculation I thought I should perform was of the total area of each room in the map, to get a better idea of the playable space the player actually interacts with. As such, all measurements and methods work towards completing these two calculations. With the scope of my goals established, the second order of business was to create a plan for what measurements I would actually need to make in order to calculate areas. I thought the best way to do this was to plan out what segments of Nacht der Untoten I would actually need to measure the distance of in order to calculate the area for different parts of each room. And so, I first created a bunch of diagrams showing the segments I needed to measure. Then, I sectioned off areas of each room into shapes which would be easy to calculate the area for. This resulted in basically a bunch of rectangles whose areas could be added together to yield a total area for each room. The only section I could not use a rectangle for was the hole in the balcony room, which I determined to be in the shape of a quarter of an ellipse. With all of this planning finished, I needed to figure out how I would actually quantify my measurements. I figured the best way to do this was to hop into a game of Nacht der Untoten to get an idea of what limited tools I had to work with. This ended up being the right move, because I discovered a tool which would be crucial to nearly every calculation I made. It just so happened to be something that was hiding right under my nose, or more accurately, my feet. You see, most floors are entirely or partially covered with identical square tiles. This meant that measuring distances was a matter of counting the number of tiles for each distance I needed to measure. Easy peasy, right? Alright, time to just count some tiles here. Alright, so we're counting whole numbers of tiles. Okay, that's a fraction. Yeah, so I would need to come up with a way to accurately measure fractions of a tile. After some brainstorming, I decided to turn to pixel measurements. In taking a screenshot of the fractional tile next to a whole tile and opening that screenshot in photo editing software, I would be able to determine the length of the fraction of the tile in pixels, as well as the length of a full tile in pixels as well. By dividing the pixel length of the fraction of the tile by the pixel length of the full tile, I could calculate the length of the fractional tile relative to a whole tile. Performing these calculations required me to measure the x and y coordinates for 4 points, represented by the endpoints of these segments. The distance formula could then be used to solve for the length of the fractional tile, as shown on screen. Not too difficult, right? Well, things would be that simple if I were absolutely perfect at identifying the true x and y coordinates for each point I needed to measure. Since I am not perfect, I had to estimate the accuracy of each x and y coordinate to get an idea of how much my future calculations might vary due to my imperfect measurements. As such, I assumed a 5 pixel margin of error for each x and y coordinate. For measurements I was less confident in, I increased this value to 10 pixels. So how can I measure the margin of error for my calculated distances from the assumed measurement error? The answer is error propagation. There is a general error propagation formula which can be used to describe the error of a value which is calculated from other values which have their own measurement errors associated with them. For the situation I found myself in, the general formula looked something like this. Since I didn't have explicit values for the derivative terms, I had to take the derivative of my fractional length equation, which I showed earlier, with respect to each variable, so I could actually solve for the error in my calculated fractional length. The error equation that I constructed was this giant mess of an equation.
I'm ugly and I'm proud.
Armed with these equations, I was able to obtain fairly accurate calculations of the lengths of the fractional tiles on each measured distance, as well as the error associated with those calculations. Once I had obtained all the necessary fractional lengths, I could calculate the full length of each measured distance using the length of a tile as the unit of measurement. In doing so, I could then calculate the area for each of the sections of the map that I determined in my diagrams. Combining these area calculations and propagating the error throughout each calculation, I found that the building of Nacht der Untoten occupies an area of 1,173.3 plus or minus 1.7 square tiles, and the total area calculated from the area of each room is 1,905.5 plus or minus 2.2 square tiles. Now I don't know about you, but I don't commonly hear people use tile as a unit of length. We want an answer in real-world units. Now, you could probably come up with a bunch of different ways to get real-world units into the zombies mode, and most of them are probably less painful than the answer I came up with: playing Black Ops 4.
Why you bully me?
In all seriousness, in order to get real-world units, I played Black Ops 4 Zombies. More specifically, I played the Zombie Gauntlet mode. You see, when the player is required to use a specific weapon when playing in Gauntlet mode, an indicator will appear above the weapon if it is purchasable off the wall. And what do you know? It tells us the distance to that weapon in the real-world unit of meters. This was great and all, but then I had to figure out how to translate this unit of measurement all the way from Black Ops 4 to World at War. I figured using player movement speeds would be the easiest way to do this, because using video editing software, I could accurately measure times down to 1/60th of a second. Since the game also gave me measurements which were accurate to roughly 1/10th of a meter, I could pretty accurately calculate player walking speed in Black Ops 4 in meters per second without a large associated error. Through my testing, I ended up calculating an average player movement speed of 4.48 plus or minus 0.05 meters per second. As a quick aside, while I know my calculations are accurate, this kind of walking speed is just insane. To put this in perspective, these absolute maniacs walk at a speed just over 10 miles an hour. Not only is this approximately 3 times faster than normal human walking speeds, this is also equivalent to 6-minute mile pace. Most people probably can't even run at 6-minute mile pace for a full mile, and these lads just don't even break a sweat. Okay, time to get back on track. With my newfound walking speed in meters per second, I then needed to establish a mathematical relationship between the player movement speed in Black Ops 4 and World at War. If you have watched any of my other videos on player movement mechanics, you will know how I do this. So first we need to start with one of the on-disc maps for Black Ops 4, this map being Blood of the Dead. Blood of the Dead takes place in a slightly altered version of Mob of the Dead from Black Ops 2, and so several areas of the map are actually unchanged between Black Ops 4 and Black Ops 2. So I decided to travel the same route on both games, the length of the Warden's office. I found that walking with the weapons I had used to obtain my 4.48 meters per second walking speed with yielded essentially the same time as walking with the M1911 in Black Ops 2. Therefore, walking with the M1911 in Black Ops 2 yields a player movement speed of 4.48 plus or minus 0.05 meters per second. Now, many of you may recall that a certain map on Black Ops 2 features a section of Nacht der Untoten in the cornfields. We do not talk about that map, especially so when discussing map size. Anyway, I traveled across a route on this version of Nacht der Untoten with the M1911, and then traveled across the same route on the World at War version with the Colt M1911. I measured essentially the same times for both routes, which indicated that the player movement speeds were the same. So a quick TLDR here, player movement speed with the Colt M1911 in Call of Duty World at War is 4.48 plus or minus 0.05 meters per second. Armed with this information, I could then measure the average time it takes for the player to travel across a certain number of tiles, yielding the player speed in tiles per second. By dividing player speed in meters per second by the speed in tiles per second, I was able to obtain a conversion factor, which I could use to convert units between tiles and meters. And after all the planning and all the hard work, I finally obtained the forbidden knowledge that I will now share with you. The building of Nacht der Untoten occupies an area of 678.6 plus or minus 14.2 square meters. The total area of all rooms in Nacht der Untoten is 1,102 plus or minus 23 square meters. So this is the part of the video where I say like, comment, subscribe, watch my other videos, follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/SBKNHN, right?
Open up multiple portals at a time as well to effectively kill anything within a cubic Nacht der Untoten of themselves. On top of that,
You cannot possibly expect me to let this happen! You son of a bitch!
Well, here we go. So, unlike the floor, there are no magic tiles I can just use to solve for heights, which made me quite sad. Fortunately for me, however, the help room features some filing cabinets which have been knocked over, and conveniently enough, they just so happen to be exactly 2 tiles long. Since game developers are efficient, these filing cabinets are reused throughout the map, and many of these reused filing cabinets are standing straight up and positioned right next to walls. As such, I used pixel measurements to compare the length from the floor to the top of the filing cabinets to the length from the floor to the ceiling to solve for the ceiling height. And you know what that meant.
Oh shit, here we go again.
In performing pixel measurements, I was able to very easily obtain the heights of the spawn room, sniper cabinet room, and the help room. Unfortunately, there were no filing cabinets in the balcony room, so I would have to be a bit more creative in measuring the height of its ceiling. What I decided to do was use pixel measurements and the calculated height of the sniper cabinet room ceiling to calculate a relative height measurement for the doorway leading into the balcony room. From here, I could use pixel measurements to obtain relative heights for this indented lip and then the ceiling of the balcony room. So that should be it, right? Well, not quite. You see, when calculating area, you only consider flat surfaces. Stairs, for example, are reduced to a simple rectangle. However, when looking in 3 dimensions, you need to consider the vertical spaces blocked off by the stairs. In how I had calculated areas and volumes up to this point, all I needed to do was subtract the space occupied by both the helical staircase in spawn and the straight staircase leading from the help room to the sniper cabinet room. The help room staircase was geometrically simple since it is just a triangular prism. However, it occupied a weird space that was partially in the help room and partially in the sniper cabinet room. Using some geometric gymnastics and SOHCAHTOA, I was able to solve for its length and height in order to calculate its volume. The helical staircase was an odd shape, but nothing that some good old multivariate calculus couldn't handle. I won't bore you with the in-depth mathematical explanation behind triple integrals, but I will show the progression of equations I used to solve for the volume under the staircase. As you can see, it simplified pretty nicely to the volume of the cylinder with a hole down the middle of it divided by 8. Once I had the volumes of the staircases completed, all of the pieces fell into place, allowing me to calculate the size, the volume, of Nacht der Untoten. In the end, I found that this OG Zombies map occupies a 3-dimensional space equivalent to 3,410 plus or minus 116 cubic meters. So there you have it, the true size of Nacht der Untoten. I can finally rest easy knowing that this information is finally out there. If you liked this video, please leave a like and subscribe. Despite some of my complaining, I actually really enjoyed the whole creation process of this video, including the map. I plan on doing more area calculations for other Zombies maps, though I suspect that they will take considerably longer due to having larger sizes and not being measurable in tiles. So let me know in the comments what maps you guys would like me to measure next. Please God, not transit. The other content I have been working on includes the analysis of movement mechanics in Zombies. So if that sounds interesting to you, I encourage you to check out my other videos, as I would love to hear some feedback on those. I also stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/spknhm, usually every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, starting at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, so feel free to stop by for a stream or give me a follow if you want. I mainly do casual round 50s, Easter eggs, and variety games as well. Anyways, I want to thank you guys for watching this far into the video. I really appreciate it and hope you had a good time. Have a nice day, you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.